Hey everybody, it's Dave Deemsterfer.
Hey Dave, welcome. We're going to get started in just a second. Just so you
Okay.
know, your line will be unmuted the whole time, so go ahead and mute and unmute yourself as you go through.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tim Huber at the Council on Foundations. Thanks for joining us for this afternoon's webinar. We'll get started in just a minute. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tim Huber, and welcome to this Council on Foundations webinar, Washington Update Live. We're glad you can be with us. I just want to run over a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started, and you should have them up on your screen now. So, to access the help desk, please just select the help option in the toolbar at the top of your GoToWebinar navigation panel. If you have a question at any point during the webinar, you can submit them via the question box on the GoToWebinar panel as well. We will do our best to get to all questions that come in. If we can't get to them all, we'll follow up with you later after the call. To exit the webinar, just click the gray X in the upper right-hand corner of the navigation bar. It's better if you can call in to ensure call clarity, but it's fine if you want to use your computer speakers as well. And finally, we will make a recording of this webinar available on our website at the conclusion of the webinar with the slides as well. So feel free to have those and share those around after the webinar. With that, I'll turn it over to Sue Santa.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sue Santa, Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Legal Affairs here at the Council on Foundations. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just as another small housekeeping item, those of you who are participating in the webinar are on mute, as I'm sure you all know, and then you type in your questions. Our speakers are kept with an open microphone, and so for any of our speakers who have their microphones open, please put yourselves on mute until you speak, just so we can eliminate any feedback that we get through the line. Okay, with that, let's turn to the actual content of the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we're going to cover a couple of things in today's webinar. Many of you who are on the phone with us today, we will be seeing in, unbelievably, a month for Foundations on the Hill. So in light of that, the two things that we thought we would cover today are, one, what's going on in Washington that you might be interested to know about, and then what are the Council's priorities for this year and how are we framing those out. Then we're going to turn to the Hill meetings themselves and speak with several different individuals who have been doing this for quite some time and get their thoughts and input around how they are teaming themselves up for this coming April's Foundations on the Hill. Now, speaking of Foundations on the Hill, I want to first thank very much the partners that the Council works with in making Foundations on the Hill happen. Of course, for now many decades, I believe, we have been working with the Forum of Regional Associations of Grant Makers. Thank you so much for all the coordination there, and you'll be hearing from Dave Beamsdorfer in a little bit. I also want to give a shout out and a thank you to the Alliance for Charitable Reform. As many of you who participate in Foundations on the Hill know, ACR hosts the wonderful program that precedes your meetings. They will be doing the same this year on the morning of April 12th, and we're always delighted to be working with them. So in advance of the event, thanks to all of you. So we are going to have on our call today the following folks. I'm going to introduce them all up front, and then you'll hear from them as the call moves on. First, I just want to give a welcome to Hadar Suskind, who some of you have not met yet. He is the Council's new, about 5 weeks now, Vice President of Public Policy, and so we're thrilled to have a new team member with us at the Council. Jane Fitzgerald, who is a Senior Counsel at Akin Gump, one of the Council's on Foundations consulting teams, is going to give us an overview of what's happening on Capitol Hill. We're going to then hear from the Council, talking a little bit about our priorities, and then move to a group of wonderful individuals, Adina Hill from the Southeastern Council on Foundations, Karen Freeman from Southern California Grant Makers, and Josh Gibb from the Galesburg Community Foundation, all of whom are very seasoned on these Hill meetings and what goes on Capitol Hill and how they interact, and we're really looking forward to hearing what they're going to have to say around the preparation that they're doing. Now, before we dive into our Hill activity, I want to welcome Dave Beamsdorfer from the Forum. As many of you know, Dave has just recently taken the helm at the Forum as the new president and CEO. Dave, welcome to Washington. There was a lovely reception for you here earlier this week. We're thrilled to have you as part of our cadre here in DC, and I wanted to turn the mic over to you to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Sue, and thank you all for being on this webinar. The Forum of Regional Association of Grant Makers is really pleased to once again be partnering with the Council on Foundations for Foundations on the Hill this year. It has been going on for many years. It's been a great partnership, and we just think that the Foundations on the Hill is a critical part of the annual public policy agenda for the folks in our network across the country. And it's not the only thing we do, but it is the only time each year when the philanthropy sector gets together to talk with a single voice at the same time in Washington, D.C. And we think it's very critical every year for us to be doing this, particularly with the election coming up, with everyone expecting some discussion of tax reform. We need to be present. We need to have common messages. The saying is, if we're not at the table, then we'll be on the menu. And so we need to be present. And so if you have already signed up with your state delegations, thank you for doing that. If you have not, I encourage you to consider coming to Washington next month, April 12th and 13th, for Foundations on the Hill. It's an important event. It's a fun event as well. And the last piece of advice is to wear some comfortable shoes. And with that, I will turn it back over to Sue.
Thank you so much, Dave. And I like your advice about the shoes. We all know that all too well. As we all are thinking about Foundations on the Hill and what might be happening when we all arrive up on the Hill in April, it's important to know kind of what the lay of the land is today, what it seems to be moving forward. We know there are a number of moving parts right now and a tremendous amount of distraction with this being a general election year. Nevertheless, just because there seems to be a lot of distraction, it doesn't mean there aren't things going on kind of very deep in the offices on Capitol Hill, and that's why it's so important that we're always present every year with Foundations on the Hill. So I want to turn now to Jane Fitzgerald from Akin Gump, who's going to give us an overview not only on what's happening, but also why it's important for us. So Jane, thanks for joining us, and I turn it over to you.
Great, Sue. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess we will start with, as Dave said, the fact that this is an election year, and so the first slide that you will see gives you the congressional schedule, and the point of this is to show you how few days they are actually in legislative session up there on the Hill. However, the second quarter, which is when you all will be, the beginning of the second quarter is when you all will be coming to town, is the most intensive work period for the Congress. So it is a key time for all of us to get our issues up in front of our various members. So it is an election year. The nominating conventions are in July. So come July 15th, Congress goes out of session until after Labor Day. Then they're back for a month, and they're out again for the month of October until after the election. So moving over to our outlook slide, the outlook for the year, given the short number of days, means that only the necessary items are likely to get attention. The most necessary item, and really perhaps the only one, is funding the government, the appropriations. So although it looks unlikely that we will actually get an agreed budget resolution between the two houses, the appropriators have agreed to move forward, both Democrat and Republican. Without that resolution, it's possible the House may come together with a resolution, but appropriations subcommittee hearings have already started, and they will need to pass legislation, all 12 appropriations bills, by October 1st, which is the beginning of the new fiscal year. So that's really the most necessary item, if possibly the only necessary item on the agenda. As folks will recall, on the tax side of things, the extenders, the Protecting Americans from Tax Hikes Act, the PATH Act, extended and made permanent, for instance, our IRA rollover provision last year. So a lot of the oomph, I guess I would say, is out of the tax agenda, with some of the important provisions being made permanent, some getting a 5-year extension. So it makes for not necessarily quiet on sort of the hearing front, but certainly quiet on legislation getting enacted. Unlikely to see a lot. There are a couple of exceptions to that. Some of the extenders did not get done or have 2016 expiration dates. So there will be some attention paid to that, and possibly towards the end of the year, maybe in a lame duck session, as is pointed out at the bottom of this slide. This bifurcated year, there's likely to be more activity after the election in a lame duck session. And there's really only a couple of other things relative must-do on the agenda, which includes the aviation programs and taxes extension, and there's a commitment to rescuing Puerto Rico from its debt situation, which may include a tax title as well. The other item that will cause much discussion, not sure if any action, is, as folks know, with the death of Justice Scalia, the Supreme Court nomination, which the President is said to be close to deciding on, will throw quite a wrench, we believe, in the activities in the Senate. Although, again, as I said, both parties do want to get the appropriations work done, so we believe at least those bills will start to move forward. So moving over to more specifically on the tax agenda, what's happening in the committees is really laying a foundation for consideration of tax reform after the new president is elected. And as folks that have worked around Congress know, whatever's laid on the table this year, even if it's not adopted and signed into law by the president, remains out there as a precedent. So it will be important to follow what's going on in both tax writing committees. And starting with the House, at the direction of Speaker Ryan, Chairman Brady is working within the confines of a task force for tax reform. And there are a number of other ones too, health reform, financial reform, but for our purposes, tax reform being the most important. And it is being set up to take input both from folks off the Ways and Means Committee, which means a lot of your own members, and also people from the outside. So it is going to be important to keep an eye on them and to provide input to them as they consider how to put together a proposal on tax reform. And the idea this year that the Speaker would like to see coming out of the Tax Reform Task Force is a proposal not in legislative language, but the outlines of a comprehensive tax reform proposal, which would include the individual side, which is what we are most interested in, the charitable deduction and other changes along those lines. And this is all intended to be done before they recess in July for the convention. So very short timeline. The only other thing I would point out on this slide with respect to specific issues of concern to the philanthropic community is this letter that the leadership of the two tax writing committees sent to 56 private colleges asking for information about their endowments. This is an issue that's been percolating. Ways and Means held a hearing last year on the cost of college compared to their endowments, compared to what students were getting in aid. So this is an issue that not sure what kind of vehicle it would be attached to right now, but it's an issue that we will need to keep an eye on. Responses to those letters are due April 1st, as is noted on the slide. Then I'm just going to move on to something that affects us much less, which is the one area that the Ways and Means Committee would like to take a vote on, not necessarily the Finance Committee in the Senate, but the House Ways and Means Committee, is some international corporate tax reform legislation, which is expected to be unveiled sometime later this month. It is unlikely to get floor time, so unlikely to actually pass the House, and certainly very unlikely to be taken up in the Senate. But that will be taking a lot of the air out of the room in the Ways and Means Committee for the first part of this year. And then I just wanted to point out as well something that may or may not affect us is what Chairman Hatch is working on over on the Senate Finance Committee, which is a corporate integration reform plan. And we would normally not be that interested in it except for an unknown, which is how they will deal with tax-exempt shareholders when they propose to get rid of the corporate income tax here. So we will be watching that carefully to see how they deal with that issue, which could, of course, affect the philanthropic community. So not going to spend too much time on the President's budget, except to say that the excise tax simplification proposal, which has been in a number of his budgets and is one of our priorities, shows up again in the fiscal year 2017 budget. There are some other items there as well, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time because it's unlikely that his budget is going to be given any consideration. And in fact, his OMB director was not even invited up to the budget committees to give testimony this year. So I note, though, that his proposal differs from the legislation that we've supported in the past in that his tax rate is 1.35% as opposed to 1%. And then finally, I will point out in the last slide here on the campaign trail, All of the candidates have made various proposals in the tax area. I'm going to vastly oversimplify them for folks and just say, in general, the Republican candidates have proposed tax reductions in various ways, affecting people in various ways, whereas the Democratic candidates have proposed proposals that total significant increases. Although I will note that with respect to Clinton's plan, she has not yet come out with the size of her middle-class tax cut. So to offset the $1.1 trillion, there is supposed to be another proposal that will net out there. But the Sanders proposals total about $15 trillion over 10 years. So I will stop there.
Well, Jane, thank you so much for that summary. It's really helpful to kind of hear holistically what's going on Capitol Hill. And I'm going to pick up on a couple of the threads that you laid out as I talk about what some of our priorities are, and I think these are shared priorities with many of our colleagues in the field. So I'm going to turn to a couple of things, how we're doing our work, and then what our priorities are. I just very, very briefly wanted to highlight something that we call our public policy guideposts. I'm mentioning this because we're often asked here at the Council how we come up with our positions, and one of the very important pieces in it are these guideposts that have been developed in partnership with our Public Policy Committee and with participation from our Board of Directors. These include a lot of different ideas around how we put our positions together, and I just wanted to make everyone aware that we will be posting those more prominently, although they've been part of our work for some time, in the coming weeks as we're updating a lot of our materials leading into our conference, which is in a month, and Foundations on the Hill. We're also informed by a number of other things, including a lot of wonderful history that the Council has in its policy work on how we take our position. So I just wanted to hit on that quickly because we get a lot of questions on that. But let's move on to what we're working on for this year. In light of the fact that it is a general election year, you will see coming out of the Council here in the next couple of weeks something we're calling our Council's Platform for Philanthropy. We're really just using that structure or that framework of calling something a platform to pick up on the energy of a general election year. But what it will do is lay out, and I'll get to these in a minute, a couple of the really big picture areas that we're focusing on, and it sort of gives us a guide and an organization for the work that we're doing. What you see up here on your screen is part of the preamble to that platform. So moving to it, I'm now kind of going to dive into where Jane left off on some of the issues that are coming up. So we have kind of 4 planks to our platform, and the first one, broadly defined, is to enhance the ability of foundations to leverage endowments strategically. This is the endowment issue that Jane has struck upon. Specifically, Jane mentioned the universities and colleges, but I've heard from a number of you on this call and in conversations across our membership with our board and our policy committee that we're all very much aware that endowments are coming under scrutiny for a whole host of reasons. And so you will be seeing a lot of work out of the Council to really try to fortify endowments, fortify kind of the way people think about them, educate, and be sure we keep this keep the current flexibility that we have. So more to come on that. Second, Assure Philanthropy is a key stakeholder in federal policy making. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but as you probably most of you know, the Council has a very dynamic area of work we call our public philanthropic partnership work, where we have brought philanthropy and many of the federal stakeholders together to figure out how to advance work in collaboration, which may be linking arms and it may be just moving alongside one another. But our veterans work is in this space, disabilities workforce, a number of different issues. So we'll be putting focus there. that is work that really came about at the council at the beginning of this Obama administration, so about 8 years ago. And we want to be sure that we are cementing some of this moving forward so that it doesn't, this enthusiasm doesn't end with this administration. I'm going to jump to the fourth one because the third one is going to take me the most explanation and time. Our fourth plank is to support the evolution of American philanthropy. And when you see our platform come out, you'll see that much more extensively explained. But really what we mean here is, as we all know, working in philanthropy, there are a lot of new or evolving or maybe not so new ways that philanthropists are working to support or advance the social good or the common good. And as we look at what's happening in tax reform or at the state level, we want to just assure that things are not chilled in any way, that things aren't done to maybe intentionally or unintentionally stop or hinder those efforts. We don't necessarily see anything that needs to be done proactively. This is really more of a keeping an eye on the landscape to be sure that philanthropy can flourish in a number of different ways, both including the very traditional forms that we all know, but also some of these newer ideas. Now let me jump to the third one, which is fortify tax policy to allow philanthropy to flourish. This keys in very much on what Jane was just laying out for us around what's happening with comprehensive tax reform this year. While we will likely not see a bill that will get taken to a vote, all of the groundwork for eventual tax reform is being done now. And this really goes to the comment I made early in this call, which is, sometimes it seems not a lot's happening in Washington, and yet behind the scenes a lot is happening. And one thing we know from our conversations with Hill staff, from our work with all of our wonderful colleagues in the field, is there's a lot of talk around what should or shouldn't be done in a comprehensive tax reform framework. And what we are most mindful of is what are the forces that are motivating or driving any sort of proposals that are being considered, whether it's proposals around donor-advised funds or around UBIT or around supporting organizations, whatever it might be. What's driving those ideas? How might we address either the challenges or the opportunities? What tools do we have? What conversations do we need to be having? And then, down the line, how might we help actually form some of that language? So a lot of attention on that, and that's why Foundations on the Hill is a great example of something that's so important in this framework, because we have to always be educating and re-educating and re-educating on the role that philanthropy is playing in communities and for elected officials' constituents. So really important. Now, specifically, what might be going on? Well, we are working with partners in the field, including the Alliance for Charitable Reform, Independent Sector, the Community Foundation Public Awareness Initiative, Association of Fundraising Professionals, and others, to see how we might continue some of the momentum that was built during that extenders process that Jane reminded us of during her presentation. Those tax extenders, the 3 charitable tax extenders, were made permanent in their current form, but as most of you know on this call, there were also efforts that got pretty far along to try to expand the IRA charitable rollover to allow distributions to donor-advised funds. And then on a parallel track, we were working really hard and gained a lot of momentum around simplifying the private foundation excise tax to a flat rate of 1%. So we are all trying to see if there might be an opportunity to keep those 2 issues alive, and we will continue to be talking about those issues so that if there's an opportunity for some type of legislation, sort of piecemeal, to be addressed this year, maybe we can become a part of that, but also, and very importantly, that these issues stay alive as tax reform is considered. And we feel that some of these issues are pretty broadly supported on the Hill, and not a whole lot of questions around them, and so we could have some opportunity there. So more to come within the coming weeks as we're leading up to Foundations on the Hill. There are very active conversations happening right now. As a matter of fact, just earlier today, I was on the phone with one of my colleagues around this. So stay tuned, but we will be sure that we have very clear, concise talking points on these things, education materials, and all kinds of opportunities that can be put forward during Foundations on the Hill, and of course after that. So with that, I am going to turn the program over to sort of the second chapter of what we're talking about today, which is how can you engage? And I'm really looking forward to hearing from Adina, Karen, and Josh. And my wonderful colleague, Catherine LeBeau, has been working with them on this part of the presentation today. So I'm going to turn things over to Catherine, and she's going to lead a conversation with our three wonderful colleagues. Catherine, it's all yours.
Thank you, Sue. So the three experts that we have with us today, Adina Hill, Karen Freeman, and Josh Gibb, are all previous participants in FOSS. They've all attended many Hill meetings and have a history of engaging with lawmakers and their staff. And so we are honored to have them here today. And so I'm going to walk them through a series of questions that we hope will help, first-time FOSS participants or, folks that maybe aren't as comfortable conducting Hill meetings in sort of giving them some background preparatory information. So first of all, what do the three of you do to prepare for your Hill meetings? What steps do you take to make sure you are armed with what you need going up to Hill meetings?
Hi, Catherine. This is Karen, and really what we start with is trying to figure out who should be our delegation that we're going to be taking to Washington for Foundations on the Hill, and we base that on the issues and the platform coming from the Council on Foundations, but also on the issues our members are most interested in and what kind of policy we've been working on in the in the months coming up to that point. Our members are very involved with policy issues on the areas that they fund, so it may be veterans, homelessness, child welfare. And so we also want members who are going to be part of our delegation that can meet with our congressional leaders from our area that also not only may talk about the council's platform and our issues regarding tax reform, but also can talk about the areas that we're focusing on. The other issue is that Southern California Grantmakers is made up of, we serve 8 counties. So we also have a lot of congressional offices that we try to identify. So we really work on figuring out who are the real key people we want to focus on based on those issues. And then also we are partnering with Northern California Grantmakers and San Diego Grantmakers on our visits on Foundations on the Hill. So we also want to make sure we're including any visits that may be statewide, but also that may be regional to their location. So those are kind of the first steps we do, is who should we be taking. We then decide, what appointments we want to make, and then we start putting our packets of information together to make sure that what we are providing to these offices and these leaders is something that they will find useful and also something that they will have to hold on to once, we leave that meeting.
This is Adina. Our process is very similar to Karen's. We determine who's going to serve as that organizing individual who will recruit members from the state. FCCF is a 11-state regional association, so we identify captains in each state to head up the delegation for that state. So once we identify that leader, we're delegating various tasks. So who's going to set the meeting, who will attend which meetings, and who to schedule those meetings with. Again, as Karen emphasized, we focus on those key targets, focus on the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee as our first stops, and other key leaders in Congress. I tend to use spreadsheets to keep all this information organized, who will be attending from each state, the members of Congress we will be visiting, and any additional notes we have about some of their some research about the members of Congress, so we can cater talking points or provide information that may resonate with that member, and that's something that I continue to share with those state captains. I also encourage the state captains to identify someone who can serve as the opener and closer to keep the meeting going and flowing and keep things on track while you're in the meeting. And we also do a conference call for the leaders here in the South to make sure that we have some consistent messaging so that we're clear about our ask and we know exactly what information we're trying to advance when we get there. So we're coordinating with the forum, we're coordinating with COF to make sure that we're on board with that unified voice. So the other thing I wanted to mention here is that when we know what legislation will impact the sector, it's important to make all the members of Congress aware, because everyone doesn't have the same level of understanding. So making sure that we're clear about our ask and being aware of where the bill is, what the climate is, so that when legislation does come across the desk of a member, they remember us, remember to contact us, and know that the issue will impact us.
And I just want to restate that, but kind of jump on with Adina too, is that we do the same kind of things, even though we're not as large with all the different states that she's dealing with, but we do also prepare individual information on each of the members of Congress, or if we're going to meet with, say, the governor's office in Washington, that we make sure that our members that are attending have that background information on who they're meeting with. We also do the same similar thing as who's going to open, who's going to close, how we're going to leave the meeting, and if there's an ask, what we'd like to do. And we also, of course, coordinate with the forum and the council on making sure that we do have that same voice, and so what our members are hearing is similar to what other members are hearing.
So this is Josh, and I guess when we're preparing, my tact is a lot different. Again, I'm a member of one of the regional grant makers and an individual member of the Council on Foundations. So when I'm preparing for these Hill visits, I really feel very important that it's the stories that we can bring to the meeting that become so important. And I'm trying to personalize what the issues are, be they tax policy or very specific pieces of legislation, or just, you know, conceptual. I'm trying to look for things that we've granted to, look for things that we've been involved with, or programs that we've started, or conversations we've had, to personalize that as how it will affect the different districts that are being represented and the constituents that are being represented. So last year we were talking a lot about IRA charitable distributions, and both organizations that got them and donors that made the gifts. And I was able to go and tell the stories of people that we had been working with who increased their gift when they learned about the provision, so I could express the importance of what that meant to the sector. And putting it in terms like that and humanizing it is great for the member, because then the member can tell their staff exactly, you know, how this is impacting, how they want to vote. And I think that's the other thing to sort of keep in your mind when you're in these Hill visits in these offices. Your time isn't very long. For people who haven't done this before, you have a short amount of time, and you're going to have two audiences in each meeting. You're going to have the member of Congress, and you're going to have the staff that's supporting the member of Congress. The member of Congress wants to hear the personal stories. They want to hear about the relationships. They want to hear about the connections, and that's something that we do a lot of here. The staffer wants the numbers and how it impacts things, and who else is supportive, and so knowing who your audience is probably one of the biggest things you can do to prepare, and then focus on how it's impacting the people at home. That's what gets everyone's attention. That's what makes a successful visit.
Great, thank you all. That was very informative. So moving on, so we've talked a little bit about what you all do to prepare back home before you come here to DC and go on those Hill visits, but specifically, what types of materials do you bring with you to share with lawmakers and their staff to sort of educate them about their districts and the work you do in their districts?
So this is Adina. To assist our members in communicating more about their work, like Josh was just explaining, we work in partnership with Foundation Center to produce fact sheets to hand deliver to members of Congress during the event. One fact sheet is developed for each of our states in the footprint, and those sheets will include various data points from Foundation Center and a select spotlight story from the profile state. So this year what we're doing is focusing on public-private partnerships. So it was interesting to hear Sue mention that earlier on the call. So we're reinforcing that sector message about collective impact and shared goals, and we want to convey that to the members of Congress. We're really trying to use that fact sheet as a tool to help members share compelling stories. So they'll be able to reference the story that's included on the fall fact sheet, but they'll also be inspired to share more about the work in the district, so that they can, again, like Josh mentioned, resonate with the member based on that member's interests or based on the concerns in that member's district. So the fall fact sheet is one thing that we definitely take with us in addition to the talking points that COF and the forum put together for the network.
This is Karen. We obviously do something similar too in terms of using some data information that we can provide the offices on what philanthropy is doing in their district, and also, with stories that they can then share. The other piece of information in addition to the council information and forums information is we also provide information about our members in terms of what kind of expertise our members have. When we're talking about the public-private partnerships, we want to let the offices understand and know that they have a resource in the community, not just for money, but they have a resource in the community for a brain trust and for people who can help them on issues that they're interested in, and that this resource could be really useful to them, whether it's in the district or whether it's in Washington. So we try to provide to them areas of expertise that our members have on the various issues, so that if they have something that they want to consider, that we're able then to provide and connect a member with that congressional office and say, you could work together on this, or this person might be able to help you provide more data.
I guess what I would add to this conversation is I always try to take an invitation for the member to come back and learn a little bit more. You're going to hit them with facts, you're going to give them the sheets, and we have the same thing when we're in the Illinois delegation. But I'm always trying to take an invitation to get them to know a little bit more, giving them an invitation to come back. Can I set something up for you? What can I be doing for you to help expand your network or your knowledge back home? Because again, with the member of Congress, it's all personal, it's all relational, and so I'm always looking for that opportunity, and have come with an idea in mind based on the last time I spoke with them. Hey, can we give you this, or can we show you this? And really 10 times out of 10, it works, and they want to know more, and I'm able to explain and showcase the power of philanthropy in their district, which then helps cement the importance of the conversation, the next conversation you have, which is maybe more specific about issues. So I'm always bringing an invitation for them to engage with the sector back in their district.
Great advice. And I just want to add that if you know the name of the staffer who you're meeting with in advance, you can always send them some information about you and about your work via email, or you can follow up with them after the meeting with those types of materials as well. We all know that sometimes hard copies can get lost and clutter on desks and whatnot, so it's always good if you have an electronic copy available as well. So moving on to specifically, how do you talk about the work that you do, or in the case of the regional associations, the work that your members do? Do you use sort of anecdotes? Do you have data that you offer and fact sheets? What type of information do you like to share about your impact among their constituents that you think really resonates with lawmakers and staff?
Well, this is Josh. I think back to what we've always attempted to do is build that relationship. We're taking both fact and anecdotal. We're coming prepared with real examples, and it's my goal to make those conversations and those examples as real as possible, which is why we really focus on in-district work and relationship building before we get to the Hill. And that's been pretty successful for us because we are able to sort of continue the conversation every time we're in front of our member or every time we're in front of one of their staff members, because we've done a good job of showcasing it here locally. So when I'm in these Hill visits, because we focused on our in-district relationship, we can reference different conversations or different tours or different meetings that we've had here and say, oh, remember when you were at the Habitat for Humanity home and had met Mr. Knight? He's someone now who's looking to expand to do more renovation work rather than just construction work. And if he wasn't able to do that, the tax code, if the tax code changed, we wouldn't be able to do that. Or if he was unable to get that IRA charitable distribution, they wouldn't have been able to explore what this renovation work would be. So I'm always trying to tie back to someone they already know because that's what's going to stick with them. Because you have to remember, they have 100 of these visits. Jane talked earlier about how this is the most intense work time for them. But they're meeting upon meeting upon meeting. So you've really got to focus, in my opinion, on how to make it real and how to connect it with someone that they already know, because that's what's driving the members of Congress.
I agree, Josh.
Yeah. This is Karen, and I agree too. In terms of making it personal, we also try on our delegation to have some member of our delegation who may be from that congressional district, whether they live there, whether that's where their foundation or is located, so that they also have that relationship too. We also believe on doing that work up front at the district level or the local level, so that when we go, we're not strangers. They already somewhat know us. They know what we are and what we do, and what our members are doing in their communities. So I really just ditto what Josh had said.
Right, and in addition to that fact sheet, we have talking points, and on those talking point sheets, we generally have some district breakdown information. So by congressional district, the giving that's occurring in that district, so that our members, when they're in the meeting, can speak to those numbers and bring those numbers to life. So it's not just a data set sitting there on a sheet of paper, but they can talk about the impact of the work that they're doing in that district, so that it resonates a little bit more with the member. So those are some of the ways that we're getting that information and relaying that information to members during those visits.
Great, thank you. So I have a final question for you all. So you come to DC and you go on a bunch of visits with members of Congress and their staff, and you tell them about all the wonderful work you're doing back at home. How do you maintain those relationships after that visit? So what do you do to follow up after the meetings, and how do you ensure that it's not just a one-time visit, but an ongoing, back and forth relationship?
Well, I can start. You have to be intentional. I mean, the relationship isn't going to go anywhere if you don't start it and you don't just are proactive in reaching out to staff to set up meeting times, to set up opportunities to continue that conversation. So really, the simple answer is you just have to do it. If one of the members of staff has asked for something, I mean, you follow up and you give it to them right away. And then, as I said, I go with this invitation in hand to say, hey, can we set something up in district? Well, I'm going to follow up on that, and I'm going to make that happen. And what I will do is, however that conversation goes, whatever it is that we talk about, there's a lot of diversity within the nonprofit sector, and so I'm going to look for a tour that really reinforces the point and the conversation that we had in DC. Because again, when you're dealing with members of Congress and their staff, time is short. You have to make the most of every opportunity, and so you just have to have some savvy in knowing how that conversation went and knowing your local district, their district, and the feel of the district, and putting all of that together. So again, as much as I can keep that continuity of conversation going, the better from my perspective.
Right, Josh, I completely agree. This is Adina. Follow-up is all about is where the money is with the relationship building, because that meeting is so short. Getting in front of a member or their staff consistently is really where it is. So the things that we're doing is making sure that we encourage our members to provide the offices with infographics, any research that you're doing around issues in the state or areas that you're funding in, any reports that you're contributing to or funding. Another is to organize or participate in programming in the district. SCCF, we do a program, Foundations 101, and last year in Georgia, as an example, we invited district directors and chief of staff from all 16 congressional offices to attend a lunch program. And during that program, we had a diverse panel of funders providing insights about the sector, their work in particular districts across the state, and providing some resources for those attendees from the congressional offices. So we're constantly trying to create opportunities for members to connect and be that resource for our members and support them in their engagement. So we're providing tips via webinar during our August recess webinar. That's another opportunity for us to do more of that encouragement for members to reach out so that they can create those site visits and tours that Josh just mentioned. So we're just trying to keep members in front of the members of Congress so that they have that consistency and those relationships are solidified.
And this is Karen, and we do, again, similar things. One of the things we do also is, in addition to keeping those connections with the district offices, we make sure that they are familiar with the work we're doing, such as, making sure that if there's something our members doing, we keep the staff informed of doing that. We also invite elected officials and congressional leaders to speak to our membership, just to come and give a brief talk about what they're doing, and then allowing our members to then be able to ask questions and start building that connection that then may lead to something that they would want to work on as a partnership together to see if they could solve something. And the philanthropy piece of things is just a small piece. Government funding so much larger, but there's something that we can always add, and so we try to keep that relationship going to see what we can do together.
Great, thanks all. This is Tim Huber again, and just one thing I want to add is that it's incredibly important in this day and age to remember that you need to follow up via social media as well with these offices. Some of the delegations have used this to great effect in the past, and we've seen more and more how the offices respond to this type of work. So make sure as you're going into your meetings that you're following your congressman, that you're following the staffer that you're going to be meeting with. Make sure that you tweet out a thank you afterwards. If you take a photo with them, share it on Instagram or put it on Twitter and tag them in it. Send a quick thank you. It's a quick way for them to know that you were there. They meet with tons of people throughout the day, so it's a quick way to put a face with the name and to remind everyone. And finally, on Friday, we don't have all the details announced yet, but we are going to be doing a dedicated Twitter push at noon on Friday of Philanthropy Week. So that's the 15th, where we'll be encouraging all of you and all the folks back home to be reaching out to your members over Twitter on Friday, used to great effect during the 5 Minutes for Philanthropy campaign in December. So with that, I'll turn it back to Catherine.
Thank you. And I just want to mention a few additional resources in case you have questions leading up to Foundations on the Hill. You'll be receiving some talking points and other template materials from the council in the coming weeks that will hopefully allow you to be well prepared to go into your meetings, and some materials that you can customize to talk about your individual work. And these will be sent via email, and they will also be made available on the Philanthropy Week website, which is part of the Council on Foundations website. In addition, I know the forums webpage has a ton of great resources for FOSS, so I'm sure you all are familiar, but we just wanted to be sure to refer you to those sources. In the meantime, if you have any questions leading up to Foundations on the Hill or Philanthropy Week, you can of course ask your regional associations or folks at the forum, but you can also contact the council by emailing us at govt@cof.org. And on that note, I want to thank all of our speakers for being with us today. Thank you to Jane for the background on what's happening on the Hill, and to Dave for his wonderful introduction and rallying cry for FOSS, and to Adina, Karen, and Josh for all of their insights as seasoned FOSS participants. I know they have a lot of wisdom to share, and hopefully everyone who is planning to come to town for that week will feel prepared for their meetings and is getting excited. We will be in touch soon, and thank you for joining our webinar.